Metabolism is far more complicated than the simple arithmetic of a calorie in, a calorie out. We're not pure calorie burning machines. We are an intricate system of biology, hormones, genetics, and bacteria processing nutrients individually. Obviously, we need a much deeper understanding of fat if we are to control it. That is an excerpt from the fascinating book called The Secret Life of Fat by my guest today, Dr. Sylvia Tara. Dr. Tara holds a PhD in biochemistry and was driven to research fat, science, and lifestyle after she finally got fed up with eating less and exercising more than her slimmer friends throughout her life. I can definitely relate to that. Her experiences told her that there was more to weight loss than just calorie in, calorie out. As a biochemist, she was driven to get to the bottom of fat's mysteries and the reasons it vexes us. In her best-selling book, The Secret Life of Fat, she reveals the complex biology of fat, how it resists loss, and what to do to remove stubborn fat. Readers will learn that fat surprisingly uses many tricks to stay on us. And only if you understand those tricks can you beat fat at its own game. You can find her at www.thesecretlifeoffat.com. So welcome, Dr. Tara. So happy to have you here.
Great. Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yes, I loved your book. It's like so up my alley. And your story in the beginning, I was like, oh, how I can relate. And I know so many women out there can relate, which is why is this person eating exactly what I am, working out the same amount, and yet she is super skinny and I'm not?
Right.
Right. So let's start there. I want you to tell like what your struggles were as you were growing up and into your 20s. What was happening to your body?
So I actually struggled with weight my whole life. I mean, even as a child, I gained weight really easily. And I had friends all around me who could eat what they wanted, candy, at the poolside, cake, birthday cakes, no problem, skinny as a rail, right? But I would gain weight. And so starting around 12 years old, I started going on diets, right? And I would lose weight, usually not as much as anyone around me would lose on. They went on a diet, they would lose rapidly. And this went on throughout my whole life, my whole adult life. And so I've been on a number of diets, right? Didn't always lose weight as much as other people. And I was about to go on yet another diet because my weight would always creep back. And I thought, I really need to understand my fat. My fat is not behaving like other people's fat. I gain it very easily. It's a struggle to lose it. I lose it at a very slow rate. I seem to have to go through extreme measures before it will go. The diet industry is full of everybody who is sure that their method is going to help you. And if you don't lose weight on their method, you're doing something wrong. It's you. Like paleo is the way to go. You're a fool if you don't do paleo, right? Or it's low carb, or it's, this or that, or it's leafy greens, or it's green smoothies. It's like, there's so many different things that you can really get confused. And you can keep going down these different paths. But if you don't understand your body and what it's doing, why you're having an issue, you really are just led by siren songs all over the place of people trying to make money off you for their diet program. So I thought, I have all this training, right? I'm a biochemist by training. I'm a scientist. If I can understand fat. So I did it for 5 years. I read every article in the scientific literature about fat, right? All fat research. I spoke to 50 researchers around the world about their research on fat. And I started learning things about fat that was so shocking, right? It was so surprising that I thought I have to write a book, right? Nobody knows these things about fat, right? Nobody knows that fat is actually an endocrine organ, that fat can control your mind. It can control your metabolism. It's a very intricate organ that has vast control on our bodies and our lives. And so it was so surprising. And if you don't understand fat, it's really hard to control it, particularly if you have stubborn fat. So the book, The Secret Life About Fat, is all that I found out in the research I did. And hopefully it helps people understand their stubborn fat and what to do about it if you have really resistant fat.
Yeah, your approach is extremely unique and I really appreciate it. And I think that I'm like you. This is the stuff that I talk about, like how challenging it is for our body to actually lose weight. Our body sees it as a threat. And for some people, it's harder than others. But that doesn't sell, does it? Which is why we don't
No,
hear about it. It's like
yeah,
nobody wants to say, well, if you could understand your fat better, and people are like, what? I'm going to go do all this research just to figure this out in order to lose weight? No, thanks. I'll do the 20 pounds in 30 days diet and follow this. And, but we all know this doesn't work. And yet, we're still seeing people do it over and over and over again. It's just like, it's literally craziness. But we have people like you who are doing the research for us. People like
yeah,
me doing the research. So let's talk about like the age old and unfortunately still very prevalent calories in, calories out. And what did your research tell you about that model of weight loss, which is still the most number one weight
yeah.
loss advice in the world? You'll still hear it from every doctor. Like, this is how you lose weight.
Yeah. So calories I found do matter, but the type of calories you have matter too, right? So if you're going to do really low carb, where you're not going to provoke any insulin release at all, right? Insulin is a hormone from your pancreas that helps you convert your calories into fat, right? It helps your tissues absorb those calories from your bloodstream, ultimately convert it to fat. If you're going to do no insulin provoking foods, right? No carbs, no sweets, no fruits, nothing, you can eat as many calories as you want off of meat and fat, right? Go for it. They don't matter in that case, right? And I've been on those diets. I can tell you from experience, they don't matter if you're doing that diet. However, if you're going to start adding other foods, right, like whole wheat or fruit or any kind of carbohydrate at all that provokes insulin, now your calories are going to matter, right? So it really depends on what diet you're going down. And everybody's a little bit different, and so there's a lot of little things I found that work. Like if you fast for half a day, say a 16 to 18 hour fast, your calories matter a little bit less in the window you're eating in, right? So as long as you're eating within that, say, 9 to 3 o'clock window or 9 to 4 o'clock window, I find my calories matter less. Even where I get them matter less. Like I can cheat a little bit, and as long as I'm fasting, I don't gain and I'll even lose, right? So it's so individual. And that's another point I really want to drive home on this interview, is that the way everyone metabolizes, right, or uses their calories, it's very different. You can have people, and there's research that shows, they'll have like 10 people eat a muffin or 10 people have some alcohol. Some people, their blood sugar doesn't even move. They don't even have a response. And there's other people, their blood sugar goes up really quickly. So it depends on how you react to foods, how you react to the, various carbohydrates or meats or anything. There are people who can eat carbs and not have any problem. There are people like me who I really can't, right? It does cause a problem for me. I gain weight very easily. So again, very individual. I would say that depending on the diet you're on, calories might matter, right? And where you get those calories, right? What your source is will matter as well.
Mm-hmm. But then what starts to happen when there's caloric restriction? So in the beginning, yes, it works, but then what starts to happen to our hunger hormones that counteract the calorie in, calorie out?
Yeah, so in the beginning, you do have a response, and I write a lot about leptin, right? So fat produces a hormone, right? When I talk about fat as an organ, right, as an endocrine organ, it's very similar to your thyroid gland or your adrenal gland, right? It produces a hormone, right? It releases into the blood, it goes all over your body, and that hormone is leptin. Leptin actually can control appetite. So when we start to lose fat, and it doesn't even matter how you lost your fat, if it was just from exercise and you had the same amount of calories, right? If you ate even more calories, but they were really healthy calories, right? It doesn't even matter how you start losing your fat. When you start losing 10% of your fat or more, you get a decrease in leptin because you now have less fat. Your brain reacts to that really dramatically, and it starts to think, well, there's less nutrition in the atmosphere, in the environment. Something's wrong, and your appetite gets very large. People who've lost some weight, when they do fMRI images of their brains light up wildly when they look at pictures of food compared to people who have not lost weight. So losing fat, right, no matter how you do it, right, if it's low calorie or not, it causes an increase in appetite. So just keep that in mind. Now, that increase in appetite can last for a really long time, right? It's been studied for 6 years. There's varying responses in how long people react to that leptin decrease. The other important thing to know is leptin that's produced by fat also controls skeletal muscle, right? The metabolism of calories in skeletal muscle. When we start losing fat, our metabolism goes down by about 22%, which means you need about 400 to 500 calories less every day compared to someone who didn't lose fat. So if you were at 170 pounds and you lost 20 pounds to get to 150 pounds, you will have to eat 22% fewer calories than the person who's at 150 pounds naturally without having to lose weight to get there. There's a caloric penalty, right, to losing fat. And like I said, that effect has been studied for 6 years. It doesn't necessarily go away from everybody. This is why people get weight creep, right? The weight regain when they stop dieting. They think, I lost my 20 pounds. Hey, I can now have a snack. No, in fact, you'll have to eat like that diet probably for a very long time. So I don't want to, it's not that, reducing calories causes that increase in hunger, right? It's reducing fat causes an increase in hunger. So even if you ate the same, but you exercise more and you lost fat, you're going to get that same response. Even for people who get liposuction, right? They have it surgically remove their fat, same response. They have a bigger appetite and they gain their fat back. And sometimes in different places than where it was taken from. So fat's a fascinating thing.
It is. That is frustrating. And probably many of my listeners are going, that's not fair. But we all know it. We all been on the diet, lost a bunch of weight, and then regained it all. I mean, everyone raised their hand, and I know that thousands of you are all raising your hand going, that's me. That's happened a million times over. And that obsession with the food that happens and the hunger that happens. And it's just like, it's a recipe for disaster. It can't be maintained because, like you said, if we continue going down that road, we have to continue to cut calories in order to continue losing weight. So then what sooner or later, you're going to run out of the calories.
Yeah, and I think there's different ways to get calories that will make it easier, right? So fibrous greens is one of my favorite things to recommend, or like really leafy green salads, right? And I talk about the microbiome in my book also, in the bacteria, right? Depending on the bacteria you have in your gut, you might actually be absorbing more calories out of your food compared to someone else with a different microbiome. Right. So there's a certain type that's found in some obese people. It's actually very efficient at getting calories. Like a bowl of Cheerios, it says 100 calories on the box, but depending on your microbiome, it might be 140 calories, right? Or it might be 80 calories, depending on your microbiome. And leafy greens actually help shape your microbiome. It tilts it towards a distribution that absorbs fewer calories, right? So like fat loss begets fat loss, because if you're eating leafy greens, you're getting fewer calories anyway. You're feeling full because there's a lot of fiber in there and you can eat a lot of it and feel full. And so you're getting fewer calories. At the same time, you're absorbing fewer calories over time because you're tilting your microbiome towards a different type. So diversity in fruits and vegetables gives you a microbiome that's a little bit more tilted towards weight loss and absorbing fewer calories. And so I think as we get older, we just have to be careful about where our calories are coming from, right? And the more you get it from less processed food, no white flour, no white sugar, but it's coming from real meat, not like a chicken nugget meat, but real meat that you cook, and leafy greens and healthy fats, you can have a decent amount of calories, but you're getting them from the right source.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I found that when I switched to a paleo diet, which everybody's listening to me, they've been listening to me for a while, and you guys know I'm all about finding your weight loss code and finding what works for you. And for me, it was a paleo based diet. And for me, it was just that. Like I could eat, never count calories, and I finally wasn't fighting with hunger anymore. I wasn't fighting to lose the weight. I wasn't fighting it. Just that whole lifetime of trying to battle this ended completely. And I could naturally be in a caloric deficit because of the foods that I was eating. That was what my gut needed at the time. I needed to take the inflammatory stuff out and bring down inflammation in the gut and the body. And then my body, it was like, oh, this is like food freedom. I can eat these real food as much as I want. And I didn't ever overdo it because it was just not the type of foods that you really want to overeat, right? So it was food freedom, but that's what worked for me. And like you said in your book, for you, it was finding some different things, which we'll get to kind of what happened there. But explain the fats to us. So There's two different kinds of fat in the body, correct?
Three. Three kinds of fat. Yeah, we have different fats in our body. And first, I just want to say congratulations to you for finding a diet that works for you for the long run,
For
because
the long run.
there's so many components to it, right? Like a diet has to work for you psychologically. You have to like being on it because you're going to be on it for a long time. It has to
Yes.
work for you socially, right? So if you entertain and have to go to restaurants a lot, make sure there's a diet that works for you, right? If you have to eat out a lot.
Yeah.
And then works for you biologically. You're actually losing weight. You feel good and you're losing weight. And so, some of the diets, like they require a lot of food prep, a lot of certain types of food you have to buy, right? And for some people that works. If you're on a diet that doesn't work for you, you end up coming off and gaining your weight back. That happens a lot with really low carb diets, right? People just
really
don't stay
does.
on. They get tired of it. And then they gain even more weight back than they had before.
Yeah.
So definitely find something that works for you. And remember, you're going to be on it a long time, because that effect of losing fat, right, that lasts for at least 6 years for some people, possibly forever. So find one you like to be on forever. If you can. That's my advice.
I just said to my sister on the weekend, because she was on an autoimmune paleo because she's got a bunch of inflammation happening. And
Yeah.
I said, you know what? I'm just never going to diet again. I'm like, I am paleo, and it is so easy. I will never go off of it because this has been the easiest eating has ever been for me. So
That's great.
yeah.
And now to your question about the different types of fat.
Yeah.
Yes, we have white fat, right? That's the fat right underneath our skin layer here. That's subcutaneous fat. It's white fat. That's the kind of fat we want to lose when we lose weight. But then there's also brown fat, and brown fat's around your neck and around your heart area and your spine. And that actually burns calories, right? So it burns calories to produce heat, which is very interesting. So it stores some fat, but for the most part, it'll help you lose fat if you get enough brown fat. And there's also beige fat. Beige fat can turn brown when you exercise, right? It'll actually turn brown. That's very recently discovered fat. But the fat that's probably important to talk about is visceral fat, right? That fat underneath your stomach wall, right? Nestled up against your internal organs. That's the kind of fat that if you have too much of it, it'll cause, inflammation issues, right? Diabetes, heart disease, right? That's really dangerous fat to have. And we talked about liposuction earlier. When I said people get liposuction, they get all the same problems as people who lose weight. They get a little hungrier, right? Their fat comes back. But what's interesting, in some liposuction cases, fat comes back as visceral fat. So they might have had it sucked out of their thighs, say, but it'll go different places when it comes back. It'll come back like on their arms, or it'll come back in their belly area, which is very dangerous. So the only way that they actually can keep it off is if they do enough exercise and dieting after the liposuction that they don't gain weight back. And so all kinds of different fats on us. The one to really watch is visceral fat. The quick test on visceral fat is to lie on your back, see if you have a paunch on your belly, does it stay there when you lie on your back? If it does, that is probably under your stomach wall. If it flattens, it might just be under the skin, right? Because you also have just the skin on your belly. You can have fat right under that skin. That is not visceral fat, right? That is the subcutaneous fat. And I write about sumo wrestlers in my book, because this is fascinating, where they're obviously very obese, but they don't have metabolic disease, right? They don't have like heart disease and diabetes. But when they come off their regime of being a sumo wrestler, they're no longer a sumo wrestler, they get sick very quickly. And this is down to another hormone that fat produces called adiponectin. So fat makes adiponectin, again, released into your bloodstream. It actually helps guide the nutrients and fats in your blood to the safe deposits of fat, right? So it guides it to your subcutaneous fat, keeps it away from your visceral area. Exercise induces fat to release adiponectin. And sumo wrestlers exercise for about 6 hours a day, right? They exercise all day long. So even though they're obese, right, they have enough levels of adiponectin that it's causing all the fat they eat, any fat produced in the body, to be deposited into safe deposits of fat, meaning the subcutaneous layer. So even all the belly fat you see on a sumo wrestler, it's right underneath the skin. It's not underneath the stomach wall, right? Because fat is actually protecting you in some ways, trying to put all those extra nutrients into the right place for you. And when they retire, they don't exercise. And that loss, right, of exercise and adiponectin, they start to get visceral fat. They start to get metabolic disease. And so you can actually be fit and fat as long as your fat is in the right places, right? Always best to not be fat, always best to be at the right weight. But if you're going to have an extra, 10, 15 pounds, keep it in the right place. And exercise is one way to do that.
Yeah, I think I loved that part about the sumo wrestlers and
Yeah.
how when they stopped their, because these guys are eating, like you said in your book, like 3,000 calories a day, but
Oh,
they're
yeah.
exercising all day long. And then when they stopped, they found they get, fatty liver disease and had all these other, high cholesterol and all these problems, which they didn't have before, even though they
Right.
were massive. They were like 300 plus pounds, right? So yeah, very, very interesting. I really liked that part. I was like, hmm. And so when you're talking about visceral fat being when it's bad is when it's hard, correct? Like when you see the hard, like almost like the pregnant belly rather than the smooshy belly. Because I'm trying to imagine myself lying on my back and I'm like, my stomach looks really flat when I'm lying down. But then I've got like the menopausal softness around
Yeah.
my belly. So you're saying that that's better?
I think it is. The
I
real way
think
to
so.
tell is a CT scan, right? Where they just take a scan through your body and you can see exactly where your fat is. Not cheap thing to do, right?
No.
Uh, and in absence of that, it is. If it's like right under your skin, right, and it's a little bit flaccid and soft right under there, it is probably subcutaneous fat, right?
Yeah.
And it's and it's a safer. It's best not to have it, obviously, but if you're
Yeah.
going to have it underneath your skin, not underneath your belly. And if you find that you do have that punch, a lot of exercise, not insignificant amount of exercise, say 45 minutes of aerobics every single day, right? And like an hour of some strength building, it can actually increase your adiponectin levels. You can start to change it around. The other thing that works really well, and this is what I opted to do in my life, is intermittent fasting, right? This is the thing that works for me. So I found some of the diets like just need too much prep. I don't do a lot of prep, and I don't have, I have a very busy, full life. And intermittent fasting was easy because I had more food latitude in the time that I ate. Like, so I would eat up to 3 o'clock or so, maybe 4 o'clock. I can eat a little bit, more varieties of food. I can even have, a bite of like a cookie or something if I really want to. As long as I fast at night, it does not hurt me. It does not
Yeah.
gain, and I'll continue losing actually. It's also a great way to get rid of visceral fat that I found, right? If you go to bed hungry, right? And there's reasons for that. One is that growth hormone peaks at night, and growth hormone is this awesome fat buster. And then we get less and less growth hormone with age, so it declines. And so when you eat, you decrease the activity of growth hormone in your body. So if you eat at night before you sleep and your growth hormone peaks, it's not as effective as if you go to bed hungry, right? If you go to bed, in a little bit of a fasted state. And I find that growth hormone can really bust through fat. And then exercise too, right? The testosterone that gets released from exercise, growth hormones released from exercise, all things that help keep you a little bit younger, better bones and lower fat and lower visceral fat.
Yeah. I have a few clients who really struggled with, watching what they were eating and eating a healthy diet. So they
Yeah.
opted to do exactly what you did. They simply shrunk their eating window down. And one fella in particular that I worked with, he was a sugar addict. He could not let go of it. And he was gaining he had the hard belly. And, he's in his 60s and he's like, I can't stop eating the sugar. So he shrunk his eating window down and he just eats from, like dinner and doesn't eat well. Dr. Tara, let me tell you, this guy's eating like pastries and jujubes and dinner and like he's putting a lot of calories in his little window and he's lost 30 pounds.
That's amazing. I
Yeah.
find that's amazing because if you're kind of undisciplined or like, you just like to eat what you want to eat when you want to, eat it, I find it's surprising it works, right? You can almost
Yeah.
like cram some things in your eating window. And that way you don't feel deprived too. Because if there's some nasty craving you have that you can't get over,
Yeah.
you can have a
Yeah.
little bit of it as long as it's within the eating window. So
Yeah.
different things work for different people.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of staying on it, right? And finding one that works for you and being really consistent with it.
Yeah, because I have a lot of women that couldn't do the fasting at nighttime, going to bed hungry because it raises their cortisol because their
Right,
adrenal
right.
system's not great. So then they get this shot of like adrenaline, cortisol. You see that a lot on the low carb diets. They fast a lot, they're going super low carb, and then they get insomnia because their blood sugar and their cortisol is high, their adrenaline's high, and it doesn't work. So they have to flip it and fast in the morning. Or
yeah, and I think that works for people too. I've known people that they don't eat all day, right? They'll eat like almost nothing for breakfast, maybe like, I don't know, something really tiny for lunch, like 100 calories worth or so, and then they'll just eat dinner. And that also seems to work. They seem to be able to stay in shape. And so that's good. And again, it's what worked for you. It's not always easy to fast at night, especially if you had a hard day. But your most vulnerable time is night. You feel like sitting with your family and eating whatever it is they're eating. And so I have sometimes thought about switching over to that, just because, it depends on my travel schedule and different things.
Yeah. I always said when my kids have left home, I would love to eat like that, where I don't actually eat dinner, because I'm most hungry in the afternoon. So I would eat my dinner in the afternoon if I had the choice. And like a big mid-morning breakfast and then a mid-afternoon dinner, and I would be a happy camper. But with my family, it's like I sit down, I eat dinner with them. So for now, it's going to have to do. But so in your book, you talk about brown fat being this like really good thing for weight loss. I know there's a lot of stuff coming out about like cold plunging and the Wim Hof method. I'm sure you've heard of that. Like, where if you submerge your system in cold water, it can help produce more brown fat. Or you tell me, I'm not exactly sure, but I'd like to know about that.
It's true, but it's really hard to do.
I've tried.
Are you really?
The cold shower, just like starting with end your shower with some with just cold water, and that lasted twice and I stopped.
So after I did my research, it's funny because my husband read it and he's like, okay, well, I'm going to try this, right? He started swimming in our very cold pool, right? In the morning, he would just dive in and swim, like a crazy person. But he lost he's a skinny guy anyway, like he's in good shape. He became emaciated looking and he would eat like a horse. So clearly this was working, right? This was working. I find it hard to do. I always am afraid I'm going to have a heart attack or something in a cold pool. So, but it does work and it is good. And it could make you hungrier though. So you have to watch that. So like exercise also turns beige fat to brown. That's another way to do it. You don't have to get into cold, right? If you want to double up, you can do a cold swim and just exercise more and you'll get more brown fat. And it'll burn through calories, right? That's the brilliant part about it. In fact, they tried it with mice. They inject brown fat into white fat and mice start losing weight, actually. It's interesting. But appetite can go up too. And so I have a whole chapter in the book. And of course, I just put out a course because I think some people need more help in implementing the learning from the book. So on my website, there's also a course, but there's a whole chapter on women versus men. Women actually partition nutrients into their fat at a higher rate than men do. We store fat at 2 to 3 times the rate that men do, right? And so some of these methods that work well for men, they don't work as well for women. Another issue that women have different than men is that after you exercise, like it's a really strong bout of exercise, say like 600 calories or so at a time, we produce more ghrelin. And ghrelin is a hormone released from your stomach, right, that causes hunger. And women produce 33% more ghrelin than men after exercise. And so we get really hungry.
Great. Hey, ladies. One more.
I'm going to do an upside in a second. So even if you want like a cold shower or a cold swim, or you want to exercise more and get brown fat, just beware, you might get really hungry, especially as a female. And one of the best things you can do is, like have some food, have leafy greens. I love them because fiber, you can have a lot. It extends your stomach. It extends the stretch receptors in your stomach that make you feel full. And then walk away, like run away from food and like for an hour, go shop or whatever it is that's really fun to do, distract yourself, and it'll actually go away. So just women beware of the hunger response to exercise. But the good news about storing fat at 2 to 3 times the rate of men is that we're overall healthier, right? So men, their fat, the fat nutrients will circulate in their blood for longer. They don't pull it out as fast. It just kind of hangs out in their blood for a bit. And sometimes deposits in areas it shouldn't deposit in, like their liver and their heart. And that's why men actually have more heart disease than women. So although we're fatter than men, it's healthier because our bodies are very good at taking things out of the blood and putting it away where it's supposed to be for the most part. So there's an upside to being a little bit soft as a woman.
Yeah, and I think it's just so good to hear that. Strive, all of us, to be this very small population that's in the female population that have the genetics to be supermodels or just the perfect physique. I always say, like, how many women do you actually know that have a
Mm.
perfect physique on them? Like,
Yeah,
what, 1% of your friends maybe? So
yeah,
it's so, what you're telling us is it's so natural for women to be softer, to have a little bit more weight, and that is what's normal. It's not normal for us to get down to this little tiny thing that we never get to. And if we do, then, like you talk about in your book, we lose our period, we
yes.
can't have children, we lose our fertility. Like, that just goes to show that we're not supposed to get down to that weight.
Oh, and like I even researched like baby girls will have more fat as soon as, like, even in the womb, probably they have more fat. We are designed to be a little softer. And for all the reasons you said, right? Fertility is linked to it. Bone strength is linked to fat, particularly in teenage girls, right? So exactly at the time we tend to start dieting, like in our teenage years, is when fat can be the most important to us, right? Brain size is linked to fat. So anytime you start going underneath, like the healthy fat threshold, it has real consequences for your body. So it's odd. It's like you have to take care of your fat as much as you take care of your heart. Like there's all these campaigns about, heart healthy and, lung month or whatever.
Yeah.
Today's the day we're going to talk about bones, but like fat is an organ and you actually need to take care of it. It is trying to help you, believe it or not. It's trying to sequester nutrients away, keep them away from your other areas. It is releasing hormones like estrogen, right? Menopausal women, as you know, they rely on fat for estrogen right after menopause. It is producing leptin, which has effects on skeletal muscle, on so many things in our body, you can't believe it. Wound healing is linked to leptin. So people with anorexia with very low fat, they don't even heal quickly because they don't have enough leptin and enough fat. Brain size, bone size, all those things, adiponectin, like it's this wondrous organ, believe it or not. And so you have to manage it, right? But you need a healthy level of it at the same time. It is trying to help you. And so from my research, I got a kind of respect for it. At the same time, I understood how tricky it was, what its powers were, how it was making me hungrier and lowering my metabolism, and how like I had to understand it in order to win this battle, right, of fat. So as much as I respect it in its place, like I had to know it really well to know exactly what I had to do to start getting some off.
So we need to have fat month, don't we?
Yeah.
Just
Under-
like we do lung and all these other months, then we need to have this month of celebrating fat because of how wonderful it can be.
Yeah, it's not like, it's a not vestigial relic of the past and we don't need it anymore because, we have food around us. It's nothing like that. It's like you need a healthy level of it and you got to take care of it, believe it or not. And when we don't, like there's people who have genetic defects in their fat. Their fat doesn't produce the hormones it's supposed to, and they have massive health issues, right, to them. So it's actually quite critical. So getting rid of fat at all costs, like diet industry tells you you're supposed to do, is actually not the thing to do at all.
No. Why do you think our bodies do this? Like, did you get into that in your research? Like the biological, why is it so stubborn kind of thing? Why does our body hate losing weight, basically?
Well, I think it's because fat is so important and your body knows it even though you don't, right? So like diet industry will show you six-pack abs and people with 17% fat, women at 17% fat, and they'll hold it up as look at what perfect looks like, right? So our brains, from looking at all the dieting and the models and magazines and actors, actresses, they're drinking in that, oh, I'm supposed to have like virtually no fat or as little fat as possible because that's what's healthy. People have hated fat, and hating fat really only started at the turn of the 20th century, in the early 1900s. Before that, people loved fat, right? Like looking a little bit heavy was actually considered sexy and romantic, and celebrities who had more fat were more famous. It was like really the 1910 or so where fat became hated because there was more food, people could get it, and they were getting heavier. And that's when the dieting industry started, right? And the way they lure us in is 20 pounds in 20 days, right? Like you were saying, all those gimmicky things, those pictures of very lean, muscular bodies. And so we psychologically then think, okay, this is what society wants. This is what we're supposed to be. Your body knows differently. It knows that fat is critical, right? Fat is critical for, we know what we said, for producing hormones. Like I said, bone density is tied to your fat level. Your brain volume is tied to your fat level. Wound healing, fertility, right? A number of things are tied to your fat level. So if you have less fat, it's very dangerous, actually. A lot of different organs in your body, if you get too skinny, right, will start to get affected. So our bodies know fat is important. So when we start losing fat, it gets nervous. Our body gets nervous, not only because fat tissue is important, but it's also a signal to your mind and your body that something's wrong in the environment. There's no food. My goodness, help me look for food everywhere, right? Like think of our past, our ancestral past, and how scarce food used to be. So in a way, it's a monitor for what your environment is like also, right? And so for those two reasons, right, the importance of fat to our health and the signal it sends about the environment to our brain, right? Our body wants to keep it on. It gets very nervous when we start losing it. That doesn't mean you shouldn't lose it. Certainly, if you're obese or have too much, you have to lose it. But just know you're going to have these signals sent to your brain through leptin and otherwise that we're really hungry and we're going to lower our metabolism. And don't let that depress you. Some people who read my book thought, wow, that was really depressing. I thought it was so empowering because for once I knew
Yeah.
why I kept regaining the weight. And it's
Oh,
because I
yeah.
thought I just had to diet and then I could be okay again. No, you just, for what, I'm going to be hungrier. I'm going to eat less than other people because I've got the caloric penalty from my yo-yo dieting pass, right? And I have to stay at that level a really long time, forever, pretty much, right? In order to keep the weight I want to be at. So for me, knowing this was so empowering. And for once, I feel like I can be consistent, right? In the weight that I keep.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because as soon as we start to lose weight, not just leptin is being affected. What are the other hunger things that we've got? Ghrelin.
Yeah,
And
ghrelin.
then what are the other ones? Because you talk about how they all kind of go haywire when we start to lose weight.
Yeah, they do. Leptin's probably the biggest one, I think,
Yeah.
right? Ghrelin is really, it's kind of cyclical in the day. And, that's like a spike of ghrelin you get after exercise. There's a number of other things. There's GLP-1, there's a whole bunch of hormones, right?
Yeah. The peptide
PYY, that
YY.
cause,
Yeah.
yes, that's right, that cause hunger. And they're all intricate, very intricate. And there's that one chapter where I talk about that, the response of losing weight. There's another guy, Provetto in Australia, that did some research with cholecystokinin and all those other hormones. They're all coordinate when you lose weight, and they coordinate together to try to get you to put it back.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Your body is fighting you tooth and nail to not let go of that fat.
Yeah, wants it back. Hold out. That's all I can say is really try to hold out. Know that this is what you're going to feel like. I found it ends for me, and everyone's on a different path. It ends after about a year. I don't feel hungry anymore. But for that year after I lose weight, it's still there, and I'm still driven to want to eat and put that fat back. So
Yeah.
just hold out, right? And if you can, there's a lifelong reward for it, right? I find that the body stabilizes a little bit. You get to a new set point. I know there's debate about can you ever change your set point. I have found that you can, right? With time.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just going to say that's interesting because I've always wondered, how long does it take to reset that set point? Like I've read different things. Personally, I found easiest way for me to lose weight was kind of doing a caloric restriction for a very short period of time and then increase the caloric intake and keep it there for at least 4 weeks. And then I could start increasing the calories and my body weight stayed the same. But like for you, it sounds like it was a year before that's, was like, oh, this is our new weight. We can stop fighting.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of locked it in. And then actually,
Yeah.
like, here's the benefit of a set point. It's like around Christmas, I always eat a little bit more because it's so fun to eat
Of
around
course.
Christmas time, right? I don't gain weight that fast. Like it actually takes a while for a pound to get on me because again, your body wants to stay at a weight. It doesn't like a lot of fluctuation. It wants to stay stable, and your fat is trying to help you stay stable, right? And so is your metabolism, right? And so like if you eat more, like if you're thin and you eat more, you'll actually like your metabolism for a while will increase because it wants to not have extra weight. It wants to stay stable. So there's the flip side of the set point. When you're trying to lose weight, it's terrible. You want to get rid of that set point fast, right? Because you want to lose your weight. Once it's gone and you establish it, it's kind of nice because you can go off here and there and not gain.
Yeah, it's always my proof to people that they don't need to calorie count if they're eating well and they're at a set point, because I found that like I weighed 128 pounds for like 10 years. It never, a period was coming. Maybe it would go up a half pound or down or something like that, just hormonally fluctuating. But I could, same as you, go out and eat what I wanted at Christmas and, or go on a vacation and not worry about what I was eating, or I'm going to eat ice cream for a week, whatever it was. And it would it would just stay. I never calorie. There was some days I was probably at 3,000 calories. Other days I was at 1,000. Like it was hard as rock, in stone, 128 pounds until I hit the perimenopause.
That's
Then it went
interesting.
back up. So now I'm
So
trying to
from-
find my new set point and in
yeah,
my with my perimenopausal body, which is fine. So that then we start talking about hormones. So then we're like different hormones, not just hunger hormones, but estrogen is a big
yeah,
one and
yeah,
thyroid. So
yeah.
estrogen, what's happening? Why are we putting weight on when we're losing our estrogen?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a theory that, fat produces estrogen. So as our ovaries stop producing it, our bodies rely on fat for estrogen, which is important for bones and important for a lot of different organs
So
in the
many
body.
things. Yeah.
It's a kind of a hypothesis. I don't know how true it is, but the thought is your body as an older woman is retaining fat because it's important. And this is a source of estrogen and probably a source of a lot of other hormones too. Um, I don't know that maybe.
I think it's true.
What's that?
I think it's true. I think there's a combination. I think your body naturally is going to put fat on because it needs more estrogen, and estrogen is so critical for so many functions, over 400 different functions in your body. And then also, though, because we lose estrogen, progesterone, we get very cortisol dominant, which also then makes us gain weight. And then we also get insulin resistant without the estrogen. So it's easier for us to put weight on when we're going into menopause. Our thyroid slows down. So there's all this is kind of like the perfect storm, but
Yeah.
a lot of it is, I think, a natural response to self-preservation of, okay, we need some estrogen because we want healthy bones and we want a healthy brain and all that, healthy skin. There's the list goes on, but I think that's my theory.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, you lose testosterone too, remember?
Yeah.
And you have like a decent amount of testosterone in the body. What a fantastic fat burner testosterone is, right? I write about some of the research on there. But with age, you just lose all your fat busting hormones.
Yeah.
You get lower growth hormone. That's a great fat burning hormone. Estrogen, you lose, right? Even with fat replacing some of it, you still lose some, right? And that's a great fat burning hormone. You lose testosterone. It doesn't help us, right?
Progesterone. Yeah.
Progesterone,
Which
yep. And
slows
so
your
exercise
metabolism.
brings some of it back. And I don't mean like scant exercise, but a decent amount of exercise every day can help bring some of it back. But you also just have to watch what you eat more, right? Sleeping is really good, right? Sleeping, your growth hormone, right, has that nice window to release in. Sleeping, if you can fast overnight, extend that fast, that'll help you a lot. Sleeping also increases levels of leptin, right? So it keeps your overall levels quite high, so you're more satiated during the day. And there's a lot of research with night shift workers, people who don't sleep adequately, they get obese, right? They get really heavy. So that's another weapon you have in your toolkit now, right? Is adequate amount of sleep, watch where your calories are coming from, try to increase the fasting window, try to exercise every day. Like I'm not a real fan of exercise. I do it because I have to. I know people who love
Same.
exercise,
Yeah,
right?
no,
I'm
I
not
don't love
one
it.
of them. But I mean, like exercise, the impact, right? Like when your foot hits the ground, the impact actually builds bone, right? So it was considered unhealthy for a while because it might be bad for your cartilage, maybe it is, but that impact also increases bone density. You get more muscle mass and bone mass, which then helps you burn off calories. Exercise increases brown fat, right? Which then helps you burn off calories again. It staves off dementia, right? It increases your fat burning hormones. Growth hormone and testosterone, right, will increase with exercise. Adiponectin increases to keep your fat in a healthy level. So as you age, it is like the best thing you can do is do consistent exercise every day, right? Try to do like 40 minutes of aerobics. I started doing HIIT, high intensity interval training. I find it to be great. I think there was some research lately that showed that it increased, was it cortisol level? It did
Yeah.
something that, yeah, something like that. But I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. This works really well for me. And so I keep doing it.
It's not as bad as long haul cardio. Like if
Yeah,
running, things like that, like if you're doing long amounts, it hits better because it's your 10, 20-minute boom, you've got
yeah,
that heart rate up and then it comes back down. So you're
yeah.
not having that high rise cortisol for a long period of time. So it's better.
Yeah. And again, do what works for you. Like I just found it works really well. I find it works really well if I do it in a little bit of a fasted state. So if I do it like at 8 o'clock at night, right? If I go on my HIIT and my exercise, that'll help a lot.
Gosh, who wants to work out? Look at, you're not eating or Oh, and you're working out at 8 o'clock at night. That you got it all. I've got the opposite of you. I could
I'm not that
never do that. I could never do that. I couldn't work out at 8 o'clock.
you got to find, I have a whole chapter on mind over fat, like the
Mhm.
psychology of losing fat. And so you have to pair it with like a really indulgent activity, right? Whatever that is. And there's all this research showing that if you pair it with like something that you're not usually allowed to do, and you pair your exercise with that, you'll exercise more.
But give
Right?
us an example of that.
Oh yeah,
What do you do?
I'm embarrassed to say I
Oh,
rock out like a teenager, right? So I
oh,
put on
that's
all the
awesome.
heavy metal and hard rock and everything I used to listen to. Like I totally embarrassing, rambunctious adolescent is what I act like.
I
And I
love
work
it.
out and I have so much fun. I'll watch old music videos or whatever I feel like. But it gets me through, right? It gets me through my workout period. It's not something I would normally ever do, right? I only do it.
Yeah, yeah. That's fantastic. But I've been doing a lot of brain training stuff recently. And they say that if you have a hard time with something, like let's say it's exercise, that's it, is if you can pair it with something that's super enjoyable. Tony Robbins once talked about trying to not overeat. He was taught his whole life, you finish everything on your plate. And he said, I was getting fat, I was getting overweight. So, but he tied not finishing his food with something bad. And so he started every single night, he'd eat half his food and he'd push his plate away and he'd dance to music. So he started to pair it with something that was enjoyable. And that's what you're doing, is you're putting on the good music so that you look forward to it, and you're tying it with happiness so that you look forward to the working out. I think it's brilliant.
Do what you need to do.
Do what you need to do. Go throw your Guns N' Roses on. That's what I would choose, and rock out.
I know. Should never. I'm a bad example for somebody. I'm
I know
sure.
that. I think that's so fantastic. No, I think it's great. I was listening to Motley Crue this winter when I was skiing, because it brought me back to the 80s, and I would just have so much fun listening to Kickstart My Heart by Motley Crue while I was skiing. It was
There you go.
fantastic. Yeah.
Weight
Okay,
loss.
so yeah. So we've got that. Okay. Our body hates exercising. So we've got to try to overcome, use a little bit of willpower, that goes against kind of what I usually talk about, because I always say like willpower never works, never lasts. But you're saying like, if you can use willpower till you get to that set point.
Yeah, I think so. But even to stay on your paleo diet, you need willpower for that, right? So you find a diet that works for you, but you're not eating cake and cookies every day, right? So even for like the diet that works for you, it does require some willpower to stay on that diet. Right. And even if there was such a diet to eat cake and cookies every day, it would even take willpower to stay on that, because we don't want to do that, the same thing every day. So I actually think willpower for any lifestyle you choose, right? If you're going to give yourself guardrails of what you can and can't do, that requires willpower, right? Getting up and exercising requires willpower and discipline that I do that. So I treat willpower like a muscle, right? And there's ways to make it stronger. You start in small steps, you reinforce it every day, you take a bigger step, reinforce that every day, and pretty soon you're able to get your life pretty much under control. So I think it's key. I know a lot of the diets where they allow you to eat like all kinds of things, they'll say, oh, you don't need willpower on that diet, but you kind of are using it because you're eating certain things and not others, right?
Yes. Yeah. I guess I associate willpower with like, you're going through hell and you can't eat this, or you can't, and you're starving and you're weak, and no, just don't eat it. So, because I feel like I don't have to use willpower to eat paleo, but you're right, I do, because I'm still I still don't eat that other stuff, and that does take some effort to do that. Right. Yes. Right. Yeah, 100%. So any other tricks? I did read in there, which I thought was fascinating. I didn't know this. There was a doctor using leptin injections. I wish that was coming out more.
Well, it had a problem, leptin. So it actually created antibodies for some people, right? So there's a black box warning on the label now. So it is approved, leptin, injectable leptin, but it's really saved for people who have lipodystrophy, which is a defective fat where you don't produce fat tissue, right? And they have no leptin because they have no fat tissue. But if you're a healthy adult, they don't really want to use leptin because they did find the side effect to injecting leptin, right? So anyway, so unfortunately, otherwise it seemed like it was going to be a good solution. Yeah. The other thing is leptin replacement only seems to work if you're severely deficient in leptin. So if you just go down a little bit, and you take leptin shots, somehow it doesn't seem to work as well, right? It works well if you have like anorexia or you have deficient fat that's not producing leptin, like drastically low levels of leptin. But for those small variations, injecting leptin didn't seem to work as well. So it's a tricky one. It's not an obvious one.
Because there's leptin resistance, which is too much leptin in the body, which happens to overweight people.
Yeah.
So everybody understands what we're talking about. In the research, he found that once you started to lose weight, you'd also be losing your leptin.
Yeah.
And so they were injecting people with leptin, and that would counteract that effect, which would help people to continue to lose weight and not get ravenously hungry and want to eat everything, which I thought was brilliant. I was like, oh, this is new stuff, and not so great, I guess.
Always a side effect or something in there.
I know, there's no weight loss cure, is there?
But you will need your willpower. You need your like paleo, a little bit of willpower, and that's what gets you through. And temptation bundle, that's another good one. And another thing we talked about is like, we talked about women versus men, and we talked about like going off, once you reach a set point, going off your diet a little bit. Women also have to be careful of dichotomous thinking. That's where if I didn't win, I failed, right? And women have this more than men, right? To get back to the women issue. Mm-hmm. So if you're like that, don't ever go off your diet, right? That's not something you can do, because the key to like being able to eat other foods once in a while is that you can get back on like right away. But if you're of the mindset at all that, you know, if I go off this, I have ice cream, I have really failed, I have ruined it, there's no point in dieting anymore, I'm just going to binge from now on, that's going to ruin it for you, right? So that's just another tip for women. You know, we talked a lot about women versus men. Men have less of it for some reason. They have a beer, they get back on, they don't care, right? They're just more resilient. And so the women chapter in the book is a really good one, I think,
it is
for your audience. The mind over fat one is good too. How to just get through, right? All these things.
Mindset. You talk about replacing hormones and how that can work for some people. Your gut bacteria, how you have to, you can have viruses. She talks about in the book, and how that can actually make you gain weight by having a virus infection in your body. So there's so many little fascinating little things, and then tips at the end that can help you to overcome this crazy resistance to weight loss that we have as human beings. It's really not fair. You would think that it would change by now, but because we're not in hunter-gatherer times, but it hasn't. Not much we can do about it. Well, so where can they find the book? Where can they find you? All that. And now you have a new course, so let's hear about that too.
Yeah, so the course is really meant to take people through the book in a more measured way and give them more kind of how-tos, because the book is very scientific. It's a good read. It's a
good read.
Stories, right? Like stories of the scientists and how it all comes together. But that kind of how-to and how to implement all the findings is more in the course. So they can find the book at Amazon.com, and the course is on my website, which is www.thesecretlifeoffat.com. You can find me on Facebook. I post there, like at SylviaTaraPhD. On Twitter sometimes too, more Facebook than Twitter though, in all honesty. So, and there's questions, if anyone wants to ask anything, you can usually reach me on Facebook Messenger or my email, which is on the website somewhere.
Yeah.
I think it's science@sciencetoliveby.com. I think that's it. Otherwise, just go ahead and try the Facebook. It's better.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thanks so much. And I will link to all of those things that she was just talking about so that you guys can just zip on over and check it out. It's definitely a book everyone should read, because like she said, understanding really what our fat is doing is so key to successful weight loss.
Yeah, absolutely. Understand your fat in order to control your fat and be happier.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been great.
Great. Thank you. Okay.